Guys, it's Stephanie and I'm here today to do my reading wrap up for the month of July. I read quite a few books in July. I'm actually really surprised at how many books I've read. So I am not sure if I am going to divide this wrap up into two parts. So this might be part 1 of 2, or it might just be a really long wrap up. So we're just gonna wait and see how that turns out. So the first book I read in the month of July, I read as a buddy read with Maddie over at the Maddie Hatter, and I talked about this being one of my favorite books of the year so far. And this was Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. I just absolutely adored this novel. This is just a book that had a lot of things that I personally enjoy. It was a family saga. The main character is intersex, and it is almost like a family history about how he came to be that way, since the specific condition that he has, you need 2 recessive genes for. So he talks about how 2 generations of his family had kind of intermarried. I absolutely loved it from the first sentence, which I will share with you right now. I was born twice. First, as a baby girl on a remarkably smogless Detroit day in January of 1960. And then again as a teenage boy in an emergency room near Petoskey, Michigan in August of 1974. How do you not want to find out what happens and keep reading? So 5 stars to Middlesex. I absolutely adored this book. The next book that I read kind of with Monse over at the Rejected Manuscript. She is doing I forgot what the hashtag is, read Hispanic lit, read Spanish lit. I think it's hashtag read Spanish lit. So this is Sandra Cisneros, The House on Mango Street. I believe this is kind of a young adult middle grade novel. It is really, really short. These are more little vignettes than just a cohesive story. The chapters are 2 pages, 1.5 to... Remember when I was in 10th grade, the class got split up into 2 groups, and one group read this, and the other group, I was in the other group, and the other group had to read John Knowles' A Separate Piece. I absolutely hated that book. I hated A Separate Piece, and I was so angry that I didn't get placed into this group to read The House on Mango Street, because I just felt like I would really relate to it a whole lot better. And I think going into this, I really thought I would relate to it a whole lot more than I did. One, because I am also, Mexican American like the author, and because this takes place in Chicago, and I went to college in the Chicago area, and I did a lot of kind of volunteer work with the inner city youth in the area, especially the streets she talks about. I know where she's talking about. I have been there and been inside those houses, and I felt like I knew what she was talking about, but overall I didn't really relate to it all that well. Not to say that it isn't a great piece of literature and great for, this middle grade level. It is it has a lot more depth, which I really enjoyed. I still think I prefer Julia Alvarez's How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent over this, as a novel on the Hispanic immigrant experience. So not to say I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed it. I think I just prefer How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent for something within this genre. Next book I read, I got as an ebook from my library, and that was Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation. This is the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy. This is sci-fi. I really, really enjoyed this book. I'm a little scared because a lot of people said that they really enjoyed the first book, but then as they went on with the series, it was a little disappointing, which kind of breaks my heart because I really enjoyed Annihilation, the first book. And I was really excited to hear that they are making a movie adaptation with Natalie Portman as the main character. The book is about an area called Area X, and that the Southern Reach, the government, has sent in various groups of scientists to survey this area, but something terrible always happens. They sent in an expedition, and the group kind of went crazy and all turned on each other and died in this like hail of gunfire. Then like they kept sending more expeditions, and like one expedition came back and they all just died of this aggressive cancer. And so this is the 12th expedition that they're sending, and this time they're sending all female scientists. So there is a biologist, an anthropologist, a psychologist, and a surveyor. They all have specific missions for what they are supposed to do. They are given very minimal instructions. They have like a black box hanging from their belt, and they are just told when that black box flashes to go find a safe space immediately. They don't tell them what the threats are to any of this, and they are even placed in a hypnotic trance while they get to the specific area where they're supposed to get. Like, it is that treacherous. And so the story is about what happens while they're there. Very interesting. Definitely recommend it. The next book I listened to as an audiobook, and this was Mindy Kaling's Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me and Other Concerns. I absolutely adored this book. It was hilarious. It just reminded me of all the reasons why I love Mindy Kaling. I liked this book a lot more than her second book, Why Not Me? It might be because this book was written while she was still working on The Office, and I absolutely love The Office. It is probably one of my favorite shows of all time. So it was just really cool to get like stories about when she worked there. I thought this was a little more inspirational. This book has really short chapters. She writes them, a lot of them, in lists, and maybe because I'm a millennial, I enjoy listicle structured things. I just felt like we really got to know her and who she was as a child, and you just really got to see her charm and her humor come through in this work. Why Not Me, she wrote after she launched her show, The Mindy Project, and was kind of talking about the effects of the fame and how she got her show. And I just found this work like a little more interesting. I thought this book was a little funnier and maybe a little more relatable. The next book I read was because I decided to give Neal Gaiman another try. So I read The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and I mean, I liked it more than I liked Neverwhere. I did not like Neverwhere. I thought it was a little too ridiculous. This was still kind of ridiculous, but this was supposed to be about the relationship between like childhood and adulthood. So I think for me to enjoy this, I really had to imagine this as a piece of children's literature. I mean, this is about like evil nannies threatening to like lock you up in the attic. Not something I usually read as an adult. But I think once I got in that mindset and thought of it as children's literature, I enjoyed it a little more. Just how everything is so magical for you when you are a child, and just your imagination runs wild. And I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but I enjoyed this. I think I ended up giving this like 3.5 stars. So this restored my faith in Gaiman a little bit. I don't know if his writing is really my style, or like his kind of fantasy is really like the kind of fantasy that I enjoy. I do want to try Coraline and the Graveyard Book, and then I think I'll make like my final verdict decision on whether Gaiman is an author for me or not. The next book I read was also an ebook from my library, and it was Jonathan Evison's This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance. Jonathan Evison, I think, is better known for his book The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, which, if you keep up with Netflix, was recently made into a Netflix movie. I think it's either a movie or a show. I think it was a movie with Paul Rudd and Selena Gomez. But this is a novel about the protagonist, Harriet Chance. Her husband died, and she finds out that he won tickets to go on this Alaskan cruise. So she goes on this cruise by herself, and she receives this piece of news right before she gets on this cruise that kind of makes her look back on her life with a whole new lens. A story that I like, where it is an elderly character reflecting on their life. Also in the story, her adult daughter comes on this cruise with her, and she is being haunted by her husband, and she is just placed in this situation where she has to make peace with a lot of different situations and confront her past in a way. I really liked it. It was funny. I thought it was very heartwarming and cute. It was like a very quirky indie movie. I do enjoy that weird genre of like elderly character looking back on their life. So this definitely fell under that / quirky indie movie. and I really enjoyed it, so I might even check out the Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving. Next book I read was my book club's pick for the month of July, and this was Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It follows the main character, Janie, and she is telling her story to her friend, so it's kind of in a flashback style. And she's looking back. She was in 3 major relationships in her life, and we kind of get to see the transformation she goes through as she enters these 3 different relationships and how she evolves in the character in which each of those relationships does to her for character growth and like life experience. To say at first this was very difficult to read because the dialogue is written in kind of like an African American Southern dialect. So I think at first it was a little difficult to get the hang of it because half of it was phonetic and then the other half was slang. So once you got the hang of it, it was a lot easier to get through. And it was interesting to see the dialogue and then just the beautiful writing throughout. I absolutely adored this book. I love Janie. I think she's like now one of my favorite characters in literature. And I definitely want to read some more Zora Neale Hurston for sure. The next book I read, I did as a buddy read with Kate over at Kate Howe, and we read Catherine Banner's The House at the Edge of Night. This follows, this is a family saga that takes place on an island off the coast of Italy. The story starts out at the end of World War I when a character moves to the island to take a position as the island doctor. And then we see him start his family there, and it's the history of the Esposito family on this island. I really enjoyed this story. This was a book to read for all the feels. Genre-wise, I would say it's the same genre as 100 Years of Solitude, but I would say this is not as literary. Catherine Banner, I think, was a young adult author, and this is her adult debut. The language is very simple and very approachable. The story is very cute. I loved the characters. I loved the story. It was very heartwarming. I don't think the story in any way changed my life, but I enjoyed every minute that I was reading it. My only complaint was that the last 2 generations I felt got kind of gypped on time. The first 2 generations take like over 100 pages to talk about everything that they go through and all of their character development, and then the last 2 generations have about 60 pages each, and it felt a little rushed. And with these stories, I could read like an 800-page book. So this is the first time I think you'll ever hear me complain that a book was too short, but I really just could have read a whole lot more. It was really heartwarming and really cute, so I think if you were looking for a cute, heartwarming read with a family saga, exotic location, I would definitely recommend this. This is something I would most definitely consider a summer read. So if you are looking for something like that, I would definitely recommend Catherine Banner's The House at the Edge of Night. That is all the books I have read for the month of July. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!